What if the greatest enemy to your growth is the path you're told to follow? What if the real meaning of life isn't out there in the world, but buried quietly inside you? And what if one man, over 150 years ago, had already figured this out? A man who didn't just live outside the system, but challenged it. A man who said, "Don't follow the crowd, create your own path." This is the story of Ralph Waldo Emerson, and this is his philosophy. We hear the word all the time, philosophy. But what does it actually mean? Philosophy isn't about memorizing quotes or arguing about Aristotle. It's not just in dusty books or college lectures. Philosophy is the art of thinking clearly about life. It's asking the biggest, hardest questions like, what is a meaningful life? What does it mean to be free? Who am I, really, when no one's watching? Philosophy is the mental map we use to navigate life. Most people don't even know they have one. But Ralph Waldo Emerson did, and what made him dangerous was that he encouraged you to build your own. Emerson was born in 1803 in Boston, Massachusetts. His father was a minister, his mother deeply spiritual. But young Ralph didn't just follow their path blindly. After graduating from Harvard, he became a preacher himself. But within a few years, he walked away. Why? Because he couldn't pretend anymore. He couldn't lie about what he felt inside. The system, the church, the expectations, the tradition, none of it matched what his soul was screaming. He once wrote, "The only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be." This was the beginning of a rebellion, not against others, but against conformity. Emerson's most famous essay is called Self-Reliance. But it's not about living alone in the woods. It's about something much deeper, trusting your own inner voice more than the crowd. Here's the problem most people face. We're trained to doubt ourselves. We ask others what's right, what's acceptable, what's smart. But Emerson flipped that. He said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." He believed, society teaches you to copy, schools teach you to memorize, not to think. Religion teaches you to obey, not to question. And that's where most people lose their soul. Let's talk about something uncomfortable, the price of fitting in. We trade our truth for approval. We silence our voice to avoid conflict. We wear masks to feel accepted. But at what cost? Emerson said, "Imitation is suicide. When you copy others, you kill the part of you that's alive. You become a shadow of someone else's dream. Ask yourself, do you think your thoughts, or are you recycling someone else's?" Emerson believed originality isn't a gift, it's a decision. And every day you either choose your truth or you choose their comfort. Emerson wasn't just a thinker. He was deeply connected to nature. He believed nature wasn't separate from us, it is us. When you walk in a forest, he said, you aren't escaping life. You're returning to it, he wrote. The landscape belongs to the person who looks at it, and nature always wears the colors of the spirit. In nature, Emerson saw the truth. Everything grows at its own pace. No tree compares itself to another. The seed already contains the whole design. His message? You're already enough. You don't need to be more, you just need to be. You might think, okay, Emerson sounds cool, but he lived 200 years ago. What does this have to do with me? Here's the truth. We live in a world louder than ever. Endless opinions, likes, comments, labels. We are drowning in noise and starving for wisdom. Emerson didn't have TikTok, but he understood human nature. He warned us, the more you listen to the world, the more you forget your own voice. In a culture that rewards he preached timeless truth. Ralph Waldo Emerson didn't believe in blind belief. He didn't expect you to follow him. He wanted you to think for yourself. In fact, if you agreed with everything he said, he would probably tell you to stop reading and start reflecting. That's the kind of thinker he was. He once said, "Truth is handsomer than the affectation of love. Your goodness must have some edge to it. Else it is none." What he meant was simple. Real virtue isn't soft. It doesn't exist to please others. It exists to protect your integrity, even if it makes you unpopular. Emerson was suspicious of agreement. He believed too much agreement was a sign that something was being faked. He wrote, "Speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again, though it contradict everything you said today." To Emerson, growth meant contradiction. Changing your mind wasn't weakness, it was courage. We often see consistency as a sign of strength, but Emerson flipped that idea. He saw authenticity as strength even when it's messy. He said, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. The world rewards predictability." But Emerson respected people who changed when they learned something new, because real growth, he believed, was never linear. He didn't want you to become a brand. He wanted you to become a human being. And human beings evolve. That's one of Emerson's most radical ideas. You don't owe the world your consistency, you owe it your honesty. And yet, in a society obsessed with certainty, we hide behind fixed opinions, tight labels, and rehearsed identities. Emerson asked us to risk all of that. Because the moment you defend an old belief just to protect your pride, you lose a piece of yourself. He believed that truth isn't something you hold, it's something you return to again and again. And sometimes truth feels unfamiliar, because the deeper you go into yourself, the more you'll find things the world never taught you to see. That's why Emerson constantly returned to solitude. He didn't reject people, but he warned against noise. He wrote, "Society everywhere is in conspiracy against the manhood of every one of its members." He wasn't exaggerating. He meant that every system, school, religion, government has a subtle pressure to make you like everyone else. But what if your soul wasn't meant to blend in? What if it was meant to stand alone? Solitude for Emerson wasn't isolation. It was alignment. A space where you could hear yourself again. Because in the crowd, your voice gets buried, but in solitude, it rises. He said, "The great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude." That's not loneliness, that's clarity. Emerson was also deeply spiritual, but his spirituality didn't come from institutions. It came from experience. He believed the divine wasn't trapped in rituals. It was found in nature, in the self, in moments of stillness. He said, "God enters by a private door into every individual." To Emerson, every person is a portal to the infinite, not because of titles or traditions or status, but because of consciousness. He believed in the inner light, a kind of sacred force living in each of us, not inherited, not given, not earned, just there, waiting. That's why he was so passionate about individualism, not selfishness, but selfhood. Because only when you live from your deepest center can you truly serve the world. He believed we don't help others by fitting in. We help others by showing them it's possible to live truthfully. That's why he kept writing, kept speaking, even when people misunderstood him. He wasn't trying to convert anyone. He was just trying to awaken them. And maybe that's what philosophy really is. Not a set of beliefs, but a practice of honesty. Here's the hard truth. Most people are afraid of freedom, not because they don't want it, but because they've never learned how to use it. Real freedom doesn't come from breaking rules. It comes from building values. It's not rebellion for its own sake. It's self-authorship. That was Emerson's core message. You are the author of your life, not your family, not your culture, not even your past. You. But authorship is risky, because once you own your story, you can't blame anyone else for the way it unfolds. That's why most people choose safety, not freedom. They choose imitation over invention, belonging over truth, fame over fulfillment, and slowly their soul shrinks. But Emerson's life was a protest against that shrinking. He wrote and spoke not to impress, but to ignite. He wanted you to feel your own power and then use it, because once you realize you can shape your beliefs, your direction, your reality, you become dangerous, not in a harmful way, but in a powerful one. Emerson didn't want followers. He wanted fire starters, people who stop copying the system and start creating new ones. That's what the Transcendentalist movement was all about. Emerson wasn't alone. He inspired others like Henry David Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, Walt Whitman, to think radically, live freely, and challenge the moral laziness of the times. And now, in 25, his legacy lives on in a very different kind of world. We carry supercomputers in our pockets. We can access 1 million opinions in seconds. We can imitate styles, sounds, trends instantly. But in all this speed, we've lost stillness. In all this noise, we've lost voice. In all this access, we've lost depth. And that's why Emerson matters more than ever. Because he reminds us, the only wisdom that changes your life is the kind you discover for yourself. That's why his work still survives. Not because of fame, not because of followers, but because it speaks to the soul's hunger, the hunger to belong to yourself, to be awake, to be whole. If Emerson were alive today, he wouldn't be yelling at people online. He wouldn't be chasing likes. He'd be walking in the woods. He'd be reading slowly. He'd be thinking for himself. And maybe, just maybe, he'd be telling you the same thing. Stop running. Be still and listen. Because there's something inside you that no algorithm can decode, no audience can validate, and no system can steal. Something vast, something wild, something worthy. That something is your truth. And your real work in this life is to live it, not to borrow it, not to perform it, not to edit it for views, but to live it honestly, patiently, bravely. That's Emerson's gift to us. Not just words, but permission. Permission to live wide awake. So if you're tired of the surface, if you're done with the noise, if something in you is aching for depth, then this space right here is built for you. PhiloNest isn't just a channel. It's a home for thinkers, for feelers, for the quietly rebellious, for anyone brave enough to ask better questions, because life isn't about having the right answers. It's about becoming the kind of person who keeps asking. If that's you, don't just scroll on. Come be part of this conversation. Like, subscribe, reflect, and most of all, keep thinking for yourself. Because in a world that wants you to sleepwalk, thinking is an act of revolution.